New beginnings in 2012 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they didn't make the playoffs. But needless to say, Greg Schiano's first season at the helm was interesting as he makes the transition from being a college head coach, like he was for several years up in Rutgers, to coming down to good old Florida and trying to instill some of his college stuff at the NFL level. Well, for the Bucs, they went 7-9 in 2012, finished fourth, which means last in the NFC South, even though it was technically a three-way tie. Tiebreakers, they finished last in the division. So you sit there and say, well, that's not great. No, not necessarily. There was some positives from this season, though, especially the fact that this team did start off 6-4, which had them in prime position to potentially be contending for a wild card spot. And then they proceeded to go 1-5 the last 6 weeks of the year. There are several reasons for that, and I'll talk about some of them in this video. But recapping the 2012 season, both offensively and defensively for the Buccaneers. On offense, you had Josh Freeman. He had 4,000 passing yards, which is more than Jay Cutler could ever imagine to have in a Bears uniform, apparently. But 17 interceptions. A much more Cutler-esque type of performance in terms of turnovers from Josh Freeman. He had times where he looked very, very good, and he had other times that he looked very, very bad. One thing I think that's kind of plagued Josh Freeman throughout his 4 years in the NFL has been a lack of consistency. He had the 2010 season that was really, really good, but 09 he was spotty, 11 he was spotty, and 2012 again he was spotty. Good old muscle hamster, though. Their second first-round pick, Doug Martin. What a season he had. 1,454 yards rushing and 11 touchdowns. He was a beast. He's everything and more you could expect out of taking a running back with the 31st pick in the first round. Vincent Jackson, their big free agent signing, played like a big free agent signing should. Had almost 1,400 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns. Vincent Jackson still has those moments where he has one game where he puts up big numbers, and in the next game it seems like he disappears a little bit. I didn't see that quite as much as Tampa as it used to happen in San Diego, but I think sometimes he was victim a little bit of Freeman's inconsistency at times, needless to say. The Bucs offense finished 24th in points per game, 9th in total yards, 10th in passing yards, 15th in rushing yards. So they could move the ball, but due to poor game management or poor decision making or a bad play here or there, they didn't put the most points up on the board. And that's just the way it is. Defensively, they finished 23rd in points allowed, 29th in total yards. They finished first against the run, but butt naked last, 32nd against the pass. Not good. Their pass defense was terrible, and it only got worse as the year progressed, and they tied for 29th in sacks. So not only did their secondary fail to hold up consistently throughout the course of the year, they never really were much of a pass rush threat on opposing teams' quarterbacks. You had Aqib Talib be traded in the middle of the season. That was maybe an example of Greg Schiano trying to clean out the locker room, thinking it's addition by subtraction. Yeah, he was a former first-round pick, incredibly talented Talib is, but he also brings some baggage with him. And I think that's as much as anything what Schiano's first year was about in Tampa, was finding out the guys that really wanted to get with it and get rid of the guys maybe, or start to weed out the guys that really didn't want to get with it and be part of the Greg Schiano program, so to speak. In terms of this offseason free agent-wise, they only have a couple of any real note. You've got Michael Bennett, who's a very nice all-around defensive end that I would expect them to re-sign. Hopefully they don't have to give him a franchise tag or anything to do so. Rondé Barber, their veteran defensive back who made the move to free safety this past season. He's in his mid-30s now. He's been there a long time. A holdover from the Super Bowl year. Will they bring back Rondé Barber? I think they should. He probably has at least 1 or 2 more seasons in him. And then you've got Roy Miller, the defensive tackle. A nice one-dimensional defensive tackle, but still one-dimensional nonetheless. But other than that, not a lot of real other notable free agents. So heading into this offseason, there's probably not going to be, I wouldn't think, a ton of roster overturn or upheaval, if you will. But the draft will be incredibly important for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Now let's take a look at how they've done in the draft over the past several seasons. Quite frankly, over the past 5 years, the Bucs have made some really dumb choices in the draft. Had some big time bust. Dexter Jackson ring a bell. I like Brian Price coming out of UCLA, but obviously it was a dumb decision. They spent a second rounder on him in 2010, and he's already gone off of that team. Ooh, Aurelius Ben. I liked him too. Frankly, I thought he was going to be worth something, but the guy just cannot stay healthy for the freaking life of him. And then even Aqib Talib, incredibly talented player, also brings an incredible amount of baggage with him, to the point where he ended up having to pawn him off. And that's how it be sometimes, I guess. And even with Josh Freeman, the jury's still kind of out on him. He had a great 2010 season. No wonder the Bucs won 10 games that year, huh? But, he's been up and down the past 2 seasons in particular. And ultimately, a lot of the future of the franchise is logically going to be tied up in the quarterback that they took in the first round in 2009. If he can establish himself as a big-time franchise quarterback, then the future is going to look very bright for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the next several seasons. If he continues to be maddeningly inconsistent the next 1 or 2 seasons, the Bucs organization is going to have to start contemplating moving on from the Josh Freeman experience. Now, the good thing was 2012, their draft class was very, very good. Obviously, I mentioned Doug Martin before. You got your stud running back that Greg Schiano wanted. Mark Barron, they got him with the 7th overall pick. Seemed like a bit of a reach at the time, but he is a solid safety. That wasn't questioned with him coming out of Alabama. And then Levante David, the linebacker in the 2nd round, is a stud. And with him and Mason Foster, those are 2 studs in that linebacking core that, give you reason for excitement about the future of that Bucs defense. They really do. Now, as far as the defense goes, though, there's still a lot tied up in their first 2 picks in 2011. That's Claiborne and Daquan Bowers. If Claiborne can come back and be healthy and be the type of defensive end it looked like he was going to be during the 2011 season, then the Bucs defense instantly gets that much better. If Daquan Bowers can come and be at least some type of third down and situational pass rushing threat to help complement the Bennetts and the McCoys and the Claibornes of the world, boy, that Tampa Bay Bucs defense got a whole lot better, especially when it comes to putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks on a more consistent basis. In terms of draft philosophy for the Bucs heading into the 2013 draft, I think offensively, they will acknowledge that the number one need they have is some type of threat at the tight end position. They need somebody that can create mismatches for opposing defenses, that can give Josh Freeman a safety valve, and can cause some havoc in the middle of the field. But their bigger needs are, frankly, on the defensive side of the ball, in particular in the secondary. Mark Barron was a good start to rebuilding that secondary last year, but I have to believe that is need A, number one for the Bucs, and the number one target in the mind of Greg Schiano, especially after trading away Aqib Talib to the Patriots. Now, you could see them potentially want to double up and take cornerback in the 1st and 2nd round. You could see them maybe take a corner in the 1st round and maybe a free safety in the 2nd round to pair back there with Barron and have 2 studs back there for the next decade or so in their back 4 of their defense. Again, as I mentioned, you've got some nice pieces on that defensive line. McCoy made his first Pro Bowl this year. Bennett's a solid all-around end. If you get, and I think these guys are key, if you get Claiborne and Bowers to come in and be productive on that other defensive end position, boy, that really helps that defensive line. You've got 2 guys in Foster and Levante David that I think are absolute studs in that linebacking core. If you can get better in that secondary, this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense can get a whole lot better in a big hurry. Maybe they will at some point in time in the draft in the middle rounds try and nab another edge rusher. You could see them potentially want to get a defensive tackle to put next to Gerald McCoy. Whether it be another pass rushing guy like McCoy or get a real fat ass to eat up double team blocks to help free up McCoy for more one-on-one matchups. But ultimately, I would expect that at least one of the first 2 picks the Bucs are going to make in this draft will be on corners, and it could be both of them or at least on 2 secondary players, maybe a corner and a safety. In terms of guys they could potentially take in the first round, for some reason I see them really falling in love with Jonathan Banks, maybe a guy like a Xavier Hodges from Florida State, another corner. If they go the defensive tackle route, maybe somebody like Jonathan Hankins if he's there. From Ohio State, Sheldon Richardson, another defensive tackle. Second round, if he's there, a guy like Desmond Trufant, maybe a corner like Jordan Poyer. Here's the first time I'm going to say this guy's name, Tyrann Mathieu. Somebody's going to roll the dice and somebody's going to gamble at some point in time. May not be the second round, may not be the third round, maybe the fourth or fifth round, who knows. But that's a name, somebody that could come in potentially and contribute, even if it was somebody the Bucs took a chance on in the fourth or fifth round and Schiano felt he could keep this guy on the straight and narrow. I mean, this is a guy that could come in initially and provide you some life in your special teams, and he could also cause some problems for opposing offenses lining up as that nickel corner. He'd be a hell of a nickel corner. Even as a rookie, I think he'd be able to come in and contribute nicely for the right team and for the right scheme. But ultimately, the Bucs, they do need to do an effective job of addressing their needs in this upcoming draft. And let's face it, this is a team that started 6-4 this past season. They did kind of fade off at the end. They need Freeman to be a little more consistent. It would be nice if they could find a tight end for him to really work with and be able to count on in certain situations. But if they can improve that defense, if they can improve the back half of that defense, meaning the secondary, and maybe get one more defensive lineman, a tackle that can go next to Gerald McCoy, this is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that is going to be a force to be reckoned with in that NFC South in 2013, not 2014, 2013. And 2014 and beyond, who knows where they could go from there, because that 2012 draft class was a great start to turning things around, and they already have some other nice pieces in place.